I'm Leon Thomas. You saw that right there in the video. Last Friday, the Supreme Court of the United States overturned Roe versus Wade. And since then, there's been uproar, conversations, fighting everywhere, all over social media, a lot of protest. And we're going to discuss that tonight. Let's bring on our guests one by one just so they can say hello to us. We have Chloe Kinney. Hi, Chloe. How you doing?
Hi.
Good. Chloe's with us. Glad that she's here. How about Charlie Rouse? Charlie, how you doing?
Hi, good evening, Leon.
Good evening. Thanks for being here. Michael Haney's with us. Hey, Mike.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening. Ron Harrison is with us as well. Hi, Ron.
Hey, Leon, how's it going?
I'm doing well. Thank you for being here. And we have Jeremiah Nixon is with us as well. Jeremiah, how you doing?
I'm doing good, and you, Leon?
I'm well. Thanks for being here. Folks, you're here for an episode of Real Thoughts and Conversations. Here we go. All right, let's get right to it. Let's jump right in. Let's talk about it. Ron Harrison, we're going to start with you first. Let us know your position on abortion and your thoughts about overturning Roe versus Wade. Ron Harrison, the floor is yours.
Okay. Do believe that abortion is the taking of a life. Um, and I'm aware that there are many different exceptions that are necessary exceptions to that rule. Um, I'm kind of mixed on the overturning of Roe v. Wade. I don't know that it really solves the issue one way or the other. It just kicks it over to the states so that they can make their own 50 different decisions across the country. I've seen both sides duking it out and discussing various portions of it, but I'm not convinced that it is going to give a solution to the issue itself.
All right, great. Thank you. Michael Haney, what are your thoughts on abortion and Roe versus Wade? Go ahead, Michael.
Hey, I'm not an abortion advocate at all. I've got 10 grandkids and 5 kids, and but I do believe that it's a woman's right to choose. But where does a guy that may be part of that decision and that conversation come in? And it's intriguing that there's 4 or 5 of us guys, and thank God that Chloe's here, because I would probably feel real uncomfortable with the conversation. But I have thoughts about abortion as a tool, particularly when I see how maybe it's a tool for gentrification of Black communities. When you see as a country we're 13%, but yet we have over 40% of abortions performed to Black women.
Mm-hmm. Chloe, the lone female on the panel tonight, and you are a Black female. What are your thoughts on abortion and the overturning of Roe versus Wade?
Well, I feel like a woman has the right to have an abortion. I'm not against abortion. Of course, there's lots of exceptions and things like that, but we'll clearly get into that later. But I'm not against abortion, and I do feel like I'm against what Roe v. Wade was turned over. I'm extremely against that simply because of the fact that it then becomes a safety issue for the overall well-being of women. It's probably my biggest stance on that.
Okay. Charlie Rouse, let's hear your position on abortion and Roe versus Wade being overturned. Go ahead, Charlie.
Well, thanks for having me again, Leon. I am pro-choice. I believe in America. Individuals have the right to determine what happens to their bodies. And I further believe that all women have a right to control what happens to those bodies. And I believe government intervention in that keeps people from truly being able to care for themselves. And I think it is abhorrent that a society would not trust grown women to handle, their own reproductive freedom. I don't think anybody deep down wants someone to have an abortion, and I think some people that are seek an abortion are truly at a moment of critical need for themselves. And I think they should have that right without government interference.
Hmm. Thank you, Charlie. Jeremiah Nixon, tell us, what are your thoughts on abortion and overturning of Roe versus Wade?
Well, to me, I am pro-choice when it comes to this whole situation. I think for a woman, it's her body and her decision in my parts when it comes to this whole thing. Now, do I believe every child is a blessing? Yes, I believe that every child that entered this world, I believe that they need to have somebody to care for them, need to have a life to live and everything else that's like that. But at the same time, you know I cannot never speak for a woman in her journey when it comes to everything that she goes through. Either if it's a family member's child that was forced on her, or either somebody that raped her. It can go to so many situations that get into that, and to where that she can't even see that child the same. And for me, that's one thing. An individual should take that up with God, and it's never on me or anybody else to kind of decide what they should or should not do when it comes to everything else, because that is not my part to do, because their sins are not bigger than mine at the end of the day. And I feel like with this turnaround, I just feel like you're telling them not to, abort the baby and everything else that's like that. But you're going to start seeing more of that, with the child being thrown to different places or left alone or given to different people inside of maybe restaurants and certain things, because, you're saying they can't abort them and everything else. And I just think that it's going to be just such an uprising of that.
Okay. All right. Now, we've heard everyone's position on abortion, everyone's position on Roe versus Wade. Now, I would like all of our panelists to let the viewers know something about you. What do you do professionally? What's your educational background, so that everyone has a little understanding that may have impacted your perspective on things. So, Ron, let's start with you. Tell us a little about you, Ron. Go ahead.
I have my master's in theology, and I'm an ordained pastor. Excuse me. I also have a master's degree in education. I've been in education in many different arenas, from administration to tutoring to program coordinating at a community college. Currently, I'm teaching sociology and English on a middle school level, sociology on a high school level. And right now I'm working towards my PhD in educational psychology. And so all of that, in one way or another, has kind of rolled up everything into my thinking on the issue. And it really actually has nuanced my understanding of the issue over a period of years. And we will kind of get into that as the discussion continues.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ron. Let's go to Michael Haney. Michael, tell us some background about you, please. Tell the viewers.
Yeah, I'm a hotelier by profession, Leon, and attended school in Boston, Northeastern University. I call myself a people person that is very much an advocate for public school education, particularly of people of color, or Black people in particular. And what modes a lot of my thoughts about there, as I look at of this issue, as I look into the face of someone like Chloe, and I realize for Black women, 4 times the rate of abortions in white women, over 2 times the rate of abortions for Hispanic women. And is there an educational systemic issue here that we, as a percentage of this country, seriously in the minority, have the most abortions than any other demographics in this country? So, while what I've done and what I advocate is one thing, but being very, very concerned about our demographics and how certain tools are used against us. And then we always have education issues in our urban environments and urban centers. So is this an opportunity for further education to have people make better choices?
Mm-hmm. All right, Chloe, let's go to you. Tell us about you, and go ahead, Chloe.
I am also in the hospitality industry for several years, a couple decades now. Think about it. And I am educated. I have have a bachelor's degree in marketing and public relations from a private Christian university. Grew up in church and all those good things. Um, One of the biggest things I think that truly supports the reason I feel the way I feel is I'm a woman. And I have spent a good portion of my life around women who have had to make some very tough decisions. Sometimes the decision was outside of their control. So I know we talk about the rape and the incest and things like that, but abortion is way bigger than just those two exceptions that are made for abortion. So it's really just my pure existence of being a woman and being around women and dealing with women who've dealt with not only your day-to-day things, but fertility issues, as well as having to make some life decisions, uh, dealing with education and things of that nature, and literally it being a life or death situation for some women that I had the privilege of knowing over all these years. So it's truly just from existence and being a woman and being around women and hearing women's stories, I that just makes me advocate for them even more.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Let's go to you. Tell us about you, and some things in your background that may have affected your thinking on this. Go ahead.
Sure. Actually, Leon and I have worked together in hospitality many years ago. After the pandemic, I switched roles, and I'm now still in the training industry in another completely new field for me. I have a BA in criminal justice and a minor in American history from Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia. And I grew up in the heart of Appalachia, where people have to choose how many children they can feed, how much they can bear, and how much of an economic benefit they're going to have to take care of their families. And I find that, the reason I'm passionate about being pro-life is that, one, I think women can be oppressed into poverty through no fault of their own and be left without assistance that is desperately needed after they have a child. And I think, government systems are not set up to fully care for the woman post childbirth. I also think, the thing that just, chafes me is the ability that somebody can come in and tell a woman that you can't have an abortion, you have to carry a child to term. I think that keeps a woman oppressed, it keeps them impoverished, and it keeps them from achieving their true potential. I don't think anybody should be forced to carry an unwanted pregnancy to term. Now, obviously, I think there are rules that need to be established behind that as to when a pregnancy is determined to be viable. I believe that, we as a society need to support the women who do choose to continue with that pregnancy. And I think we do a very poor job of that right now. I think that, the talking point that you'll see online a lot lately is, have the baby. And then once somebody has the baby, those support networks often fail for those women. And I don't think that anybody should have to beg to be treated as an equal member of our society and to be helped. And I think many women fall into that trap and then don't get the help they need, especially from the father. And I've seen too many of my friends have children that they can't afford and they get stuck. And especially in the heart of Appalachia, where the median income in most counties is barely above $20,000 a year. You can't live on that. You cannot afford an apartment anywhere on that. So you have, generations having to live together, broke, no job opportunities, no opportunities for the kids to grow up, get educated, and get out.
So Charlie, let me ask you then: if folks are having babies that they can't afford, should the schools in West Virginia and other states start providing more financial education that shows the actual cost of having a baby? Jeremiah, we're going to come to you next, but is that something that they need to do, Charlie? Include that as part of high school education?
Well, I think that a lot of education begins in the home. I'm going to say that right up front. I think all too often parents rely on the public school system and the private school system to teach things that should be taught in the home. And I know that's going to sound like something that's very conservative, but I had a parent that is a retired teacher. And it is hard for someone to teach when the students coming in have not eaten for a day or maybe two, or it's Monday and they have not eaten since Friday night.
Okay. All right.
Now, in teaching somebody that here's the cost of having a child isn't going to change much. Everybody knows that a child is expensive. They do.
All right.
I mean, I don't think that changes anything, but what I think has to happen is there's a real conversation that needs to happen around prevention, contraception, and
Okay.
a person's role in society if they do become pregnant.
All right, we're gonna talk about all those things here in a second.
Okay.
Jeremiah, tell us about you, your background, and how you that may have impacted and affected your thought process in this. Go ahead.
Well, I'm still a college student, so I'm a little bit under, you guys when it comes to the age. But
Are you
I
calling us all
studied.
old? Did you just call us all old? Is that what you did? No,
No,
anyway, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm calling you guys, successfully experienced right now. But right now, I'm in college right now. I'm studying sports management right now, and want to be a sports marketer. And just for myself, the reason I feel the way that I am, being around women, all my life around the house, around my mom, my aunts, and cousins, and not to mention, sisters. Just having those different relations and just kind of hearing so many certain sides when it comes to about the woman, doing more research, and just having an understanding. I think is just my way of just how I feel right now when it comes to this whole thing, and especially when it comes to my sister. She's about to have a baby soon, and then I'm just looking when it comes to on the news, you got a baby shortage right now. And for I think about that for so many ones, that just like what Charlie said, that don't have the finances or don't have the resources to actually move forward when it comes to them and their child and just move on with their family because they don't have the resources, provided to them. And for me, that's one big thing that that is troubling because you want to have so many of of children and the babies and don't get rid of them, but you have to be able to help these women and help these parents to actually move forward with the child, and not to mention other things.
Now, one theme that I saw on my social media feed was folks saying about the support system. Everybody says, "Oh, we want you to have the baby, have the baby, have the baby, have the baby. Don't kill. Abortion is murder." And then when that family cannot take care of the child, that support base, the help that's needed is not there. That's something that I've seen a lot through my social media feeds. Now, Michael, I want to come to you and kind of tie Ron into this and Chloe into this. Someone, three of you on a piece of a conversation. Michael, you mentioned that over 40% of abortions happen to Black women, right? I think you mentioned that several times. So, what do we do to change that? What needs to happen, Michael?
Well, there's a couple of things, and this is why I have issue, and I'm listening to what Charlie said about health concerns, because, if it's a pleasurable act, maybe conceiving should be a pleasurable act or a reproductive act. And if it's a pleasurable act, then it needs to be thought out, that what are we doing? What is the consequence of what we're doing? So where does the education take place so that we're thinking before that pleasurable act, or if we decide to reproduce and maybe something happens as a result of it. So I think it's education. Then you talk about the access to health care. We know that mortality rates for Blacks and infant mortality rate for Black women and infant mortality rate for Black babies is high because of lack of access to the healthcare system. So better healthcare, maybe that's what Obamacare attempted to do. But there is something systemically wrong when 23.9 abortions per thousand is Black, 11.2 is Hispanic, and 6.6 is white. Now, when you look at that data, and then you hear what Chloe says in terms of a choice that a woman should make. And you know what? I get that. And I'm not disputing that a woman should have a choice, but I'm a responsible guy. And it took two to make that act, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe I should feel as though I have a role and a say in that decision as well. So what is it that, and I'm not going to play devil's advocate. I'm just going to tell you what I'm thinking. That the woman's right to choose, although there were two in that relationship, maybe there's, consequences that a man may not mind taking on, particularly when two consenting adults knew what they were doing, unless it was an atrocious act of incest or rape, where that's a different category, that they have to be held accountable. And if abortion is the out to accountability, then we need a tremendous amount of education in our community.
Okay, Ron, what are your thoughts on that? You're an educator. Tell us how do we educate everyone on this, and what are your thoughts about what Michael just said? So how do we do education? How do we educate? And what are your thoughts on Michael? Chloe, we're going to come to you after Ron.
Well, I think there one thing that I want to hang on that Michael said that I thought was very, very good, but I think that it needs to be emphasized. It was forethought, understanding the responsibility ahead of time, knowing what we're doing, knowing what we're getting into, particularly if it's a pleasurable act. There aren't too many that don't understand that sex can lead to pregnancy, and especially whether it's not taken care of correctly or in the heat of the moment, you don't think about it. I'd say there are a few people that don't know that don't understand that. For me, I think where the issue is understanding the seriousness of it. Why is it something that's serious? And ultimately, to me, I believe it's serious because it does result in another life. And whether it's a potential life or when it is a life, is it a life, at conception, is it a life weeks later, months later? But we do understand that it does lead to a life. And I think by not acknowledging that and not taking a good hard look at that, we don't see the responsibility. We don't understand why this is important. So I think understanding that this is a life will help us to seriously see the actions that we're about to take when we get involved in a sexual relationship. And that life is developing. That life has potential. The mom, and I have to say, kind of one of the difficulties I have is when you have memes or you have simple sayings that sometimes are very easy to say, but we don't think of the consequences. My body, my choice. Now, doctors, scientists, when a mom goes in to get checked up on, it's not just mom that's getting her body checked up on, getting the medications, making sure she's well. It also takes a look at the development of the child, the baby, whether that baby is growing, whether that baby is getting the nourishment from the mom that's necessary. So there is an acknowledgement from science and from medicine that there are two lives that are developing. One, in one way or another, is being designed to help take care of that other life. So I think one, realizing that is a life will help understand the seriousness of the responsibility. But one thing that I've been very encouraged about is, often people will say they're pro-life, don't really care about taking care of the baby financially, don't really take care sometimes about what happens afterwards. And so I've been very encouraged by people who have understood that pro-life does not just mean pro-baby, but pro-life means that we hold life very dear. As a pastor and as a Christian, I believe that God puts a premium on life, and life is very important. So I fully get and I fully understand the, hey, we just want you to have that baby. And then when it's time to take care of it, whoa, hey, you know what? No, my church doesn't do that. No, the government shouldn't be taking care of that. I take a very different stand on that. I believe it is the community's responsibility, especially, yes, if we're saying that that is a life, that is a baby. You know what? That life does not end after that baby's born. That continues for years beyond. And so I think that those three issues tied together make this a very important issue to discuss. And it kind of goes into why I think kicking it out to the states doesn't really make it help people understand it as a serious issue. I think it needs to be fought for from a national perspective. If it's a life, if we're pro-life, does it stop being a life when it's kicked out to the states? It doesn't. You know, it's something that should be either fought for or should be understood across the board.
Chloe, what are your thoughts? How do we educate? But also, what about, you heard Michael say that the fathers need to be involved in this somehow. What are your thoughts, Chloe?
Well, the first thing I want to say is, while I get the whole concept of the once the baby is born and let's have the community involved and let's have the village involved and all those things, but the community and no one else can do anything during those 9, sometimes 10 months that the baby is going inside of the woman. It's only her. Um, and yes, if the baby is growing inside and if the baby is growing and developing the right way, then yes, it is a life. But there are times where that baby, per se, the embryo, the fetus, the using technical terms, may become a parasite and it might not be growing and developing in the right way. And then that woman is then faced with the choice of, you have to sit here and carry this baby for an additional, 6 months or however long, and knowing that you're not going to get a bouncing baby boy with, 10 fingers and 10 toes and blue eyes or whatever. Once that baby comes out, you're going to get a mass of cells. So the fact that there are things that can be done to help the woman not have to deal with that is the best solution. While it's great that we say, the men play a role. Yes, the men do play a role. That's how women get pregnant. So the root, to me, the root of the controversy with abortion is that, of course, everything falls on the woman. So that's why I feel like it is the woman's right to choose. It is the woman's right to make a decision about her body. I appreciate all the sentiments of let's do all these things once the baby's here. But during that 9 months, it's her body. It's her and her body. And as far as the mortality rates, and that I think Michael was the one that mentioned with the mortality rates, I'm sure there's deeper levels to those statistics, and the lack of access as far as with Black women. I know a lot of women who are OBGYNs, Black women at that, who they have access to it. It's how they're treated when they're in the doctor's office a lot of times. So you may come in and say you're having some discomfort or you're having some pain, and we're told to be tough Black women and we're strong and we can just kind of, bear the pain and bear the issue. But the reality is you might be dealing with something with that baby, with that embryo, with that fetus inside of you that you're just told to kind of toughen it up. So in the end, you might have to make a decision, my life or this baby's life. Mm-hmm. And it's tough. And again, with the whole concept of educating and beforehand, I know, and I'm just going to be pretty candid here, I know every time I've had sex, I haven't thought, okay, if I get pregnant, I need to make sure I have an abortion or anything of that nature. That's not my preliminary conversation. The pleasure of the act, of course, we're not thinking that if we get pregnant, let's have an abortion, or we're not thinking about, the pleasure of the act. Things happen, contraceptive's great. So you may not know in that moment that something has happened. And by the time you figure out, you're way down the line and you have to make a decision. So again, I love the sentiment of the village, but the village is, during those 9 months, this woman's body is the village.
Okay.
Leon, I'd like to respond when Chloe finishes that, because is it okay if I respond to that?
Not yet, not yet, but
Okay.
make a note of that, because here in a couple of minutes we're going to drop all of this and let you challenge each other. So
absolutely.
hang with me for about 7 minutes here, Michael. We're going to give you a chance to go to make some comments about others' thoughts. All right, Charlie, tell me, you brought up the whole idea that education needs to start in the family. Go ahead, tell us more. There's so many things that I hear families need to educate. Education with whatever needs to start in the family. Do you think that it should be in the family alone? Should it be something in the schools? What are all of your thoughts on all of those things that you just heard others say in the last 6 or 7 minutes, particularly about education?
It's a lot to take in, and I want to appreciate all of these different perspectives. For me, being kind of an outsider to minority communities, and I acknowledge that discomfort, but from an educational standpoint, you have different states with different rules regarding sex education, and we don't call it abortion education, it's sex education. Everyone is teaching different things different ways, and we're getting to the point where each state is needling down on what an educator can say. And educators are bound by the government as to what they can and cannot say. And if they're not given the freedom to teach or educate a young person, hey, you need to consider using protection or birth control pills or IUDs, or you need to talk before you have sex, or you need to abstain if you are not prepared to take care of a child. I don't think that open conversation is happening, at least not in the public schools, because they can't. Because some politician that doesn't know anything about public education is going to tell a teacher what they can or can't do in a classroom, and I'm fully against that. Now, what I do say, though, and why I say things have to begin in the home is my parent and a few school teachers that I know have had to teach things like hygiene. They've had to teach kids how to prepare meals because their parents are so drug addicted. That adult isn't caring for those children, and that 16-year-old is getting sent home with a bag of groceries, and my mother has bought groceries for children. And they have to go home and feed their siblings, and they have to parse out a meal that probably will just barely get them through the next day. And you want that young adult to rely on that parent to teach them everything. It has to be a combined approach if you want to reduce teen pregnancy. Now, teen pregnancy and abortion, those rates are they're going to change and ebb and flow. The CDC in 1990 reported the abortion rate to be at 1.4 million abortions that year. In 2019, the CDC appointed that at 625,000. Abortion is down since 1990. Another thing is, there are some that believe, and I'm going to open this up. I know you asked for an educational perspective. There are some that believe that a developing fetus does not have a soul till it takes its first breath. And there are some that regard that as a vessel at the time. And I don't want to go deep into the religious debate on this. And I am a faithful Episcopalian, have been my whole life. But I also know the struggle of a woman having to do things. I can never fully walk in a woman's shoes and understand what that decision is, that they are at that point that they feel the need to get an abortion, or they are so scared that they're going to die because a pregnancy might kill them. Mm-hmm. I also believe that somebody shouldn't carry a baby to term that is essentially brain dead, has no heartbeat. They shouldn't be carrying that to 8 months to term because a politician doesn't know this person wants to mandate that. How fair is it to put that woman through that trauma? Mm-hmm. Now, here's what I will agree with. I think there is a disproportionate rate of abortions among ethnic minorities and racial minorities. And that has to be addressed not just because of there's abortion, but there's poverty. Poverty creates these situations where people don't have upward mobility and they don't have money to have those support structures in place to help take care of those children. And I do worry, especially in the religious community, that certain certain Christian denominations talk a good talk, but they don't walk the walk. And I'm
All right.
talking about mainline denominations in particular.
Okay.
So thank you for letting me ramble on there a
All
little
right.
bit, but I had to get that out.
All right, folks, we're about 4 minutes away from letting you challenge and ask questions of each other. Jeremiah, before we go to you, I want to tell you about 2 text messages I received. One said, "Why don't you have more women on the show? Why is Chloe the only female?" My answer to that is this. I posted that we were going to have the show on Facebook. I posted it, and I posted it on LinkedIn. Everyone that said they wanted to be on the show, I said yes. 7 of you backed out. And it's interesting that the one person who says, "Why don't we have more females on the show?" You know who you are. You're a female. You said you didn't want to be on the show. Okay, so let's get that. I'm not going to mention your name, but you know who you are. Just got a text message from you. All right.
Leon, I know a very lovely woman in St. Albans, West Virginia, who is a retared school teacher that will talk to you for hours about this.
Next time we'll get her. We'll
you're
tell
gonna
her
have-
about the show.
Yeah, you'll meet Mama for sure.
All right, cool. Jeremiah, let's hear what you have to say about how do we educate. Then I have one more question that I'm going to ask, and then we're going to let y'all go at it. Jeremiah, what are your thoughts on education?
Well, it's simple. To me, I would say it just takes a village. That is mostly the education part. I think that they need to go deeper into when it comes to the support system, just as Charlie just said. When I say it takes a village, meaning how is this woman, even if she's not with the person that she had the baby with, or if she is, there needs to be a support system to teach them, the way to go when it comes to having, actually a small child, going out in the real world, because your life changes no matter which age that you are. When you have yourself a child, you're not going to do the same things or act the same ways as you do. And just for me, you see a lot of these different women's, they have they're like babies raising babies. You have to educate a lot of them when it comes to that next step, when it comes to them actually raising a child. So I think when it comes to counselors, the mothers, the fathers, and even when it comes to the people around the school system and just mentors just around, it needs to be a sit down and actually go through when it comes to I would say the life of bringing a new child into this world.
All right. Here's what we're going to do right now before I bring up another subject. We're going to let y'all challenge each other. Michael, let's start with you first. You wanted to respond to something that Chloe said. Go ahead, Michael. Chloe.
Hey, thanks a lot, Leon. And it's not a challenge because I respect Chloe and I agree. I wish there were 10 females like Chloe on this so we can have some real engaging conversation, because maybe that's the problem why we have a higher rate of abortion, because Black men and Black women aren't having conversation and dialogue so that we can talk about things before the point of conception. And I believe that, a fetus is a person at the point of a heartbeat. As soon as heartbeat, you've got a living being. That's just my thinking and feeling. I'm not a physician, and I don't know that much, but that's what I feel. But a village, when the village didn't participate in the act to, bring on the pregnancy. And this is why, there has to be communication, direct dialogue. Guys have just as much responsibility. And you're right, Chloe, that it's your body once that act has been performed, and now you have to carry. But are there not predetermined roles that we're all adults and responsible for, that we know about in advance, that we know if this happens, that's what it is that will happen, and that will be your responsibility? In the old days, they say the guy would have to pay for it and go out and mow lawns and cut grass and pay for his family. You know, those are old traditions. I'm not saying anything, but those are predetermined roles that no. I just wonder how black women felt when our slave owners raped them many centuries ago and they were forced to carry babies of slave owners. And we can go to our forefathers and talk about this. You know, and then I'm listening to Charlie talk about, you know, the sensitivity among minorities, but let's be specific about minorities. Let's talk about blacks who have been impacted by poverty, because poverty is the profit margin of a capitalistic system. So will it ever go away to a point where you deal with this? You know, so there are a multitude of complexities here that I feel like it's imperative that our women are at the forefront, but we as guys have to be part of that conversation to resolve this issue when you look at the data and the statistics over who has abortions performed in this country. It's real.
Mm-hmm. Give me a hand raise if you want to say something on that one. Chloe, I see your hand. Go ahead.
I think, and I may be misunderstanding you, but you're saying the thing. Well, you make the comment of how did the women feel when they had to carry a baby of a slave master that raped them and things like that. I mean, we know how they felt. They weren't. There was no baby shower. They weren't excited about it. So the reality is, yes, these conversations are happening, and I think we're also focusing on this like unwed mother situation or whatever. But it could be the married couple who the husband just lost a job and she finds out she's pregnant. And now it's like, okay, we really can't afford to have this one more baby. Do we, then we make that decision.
Wow, that's powerful, Chloe, from my perspective, that we're making a financial decision with a life. I'm glad no one did that with my life, because I know that my parents weren't rich at all. And they were young, 16, 17 years old. And thank God that I'm here as a result of a good decision they made. And, we know that maybe these slave owners, as you referenced, maybe the abortion option wasn't there then. So they were forced to do so under extenuating circumstances. But, my point is that there are conversations that men and women have to have in order, and particularly in our community, Chloe, so that we can lessen the rate that is it's a systemic rate that I believe is part of a gentrification strategy anyway, just like allowing murders in our cities. We got murders in our city of our young people, and we got abortions at a higher rate than any other demographics in this country.
I mean, yes, we have abortions. I haven't looked at that particular statistic. So there may be a situation, and I'm not disputing you, there may be a higher rate of abortions among Black women, but we don't know the circumstances of those abortions. So it may be a situation that since Black women are usually sexualized well before their mature age, so it may be a situation where that young black girl may have been raped by someone and she had to have an abortion. It may have been a situation where she was, like I said, had done something with someone at an early age or whatever. But even in the sense of what I was making, the conversation I was making before about the financial part is, unfortunately, it does come down to economics at times, because there have been situations where people cannot afford to have a child. And I don't know the cost of an abortion. I have not had one, but I have a ballpark number from a friend or two. And if they can borrow that money or they have the funds for that to deal with that in that situation, but they don't have the long-term funds, I respect that. Because why, as Charlie kind of talked about, the impoverished child, why bring another child into the world when you really can't afford to give that child the life that they truly deserve? And again, I feel like we are very focused on the unwed preteen or the unwed person. So it may come down to that in certain situations where you do have to make that decision. If it's a married couple, are we supposed to tell them, okay, yes, we've had these conversations that you say we need to have, we've had these conversations. Are we supposed to no longer have sex as a married couple because we might get pregnant?
Well, you
All
know,
right, go ahead.
Chloe,
Oh, let's
I
let's
just
go
want
to
to say,
Ron, please. I want to get Ron in on this conversation. He had his hand up. Sorry, Michael. Ron, go ahead.
I think one of the things I'm grateful for from those that are pro-life, that have kind of moved the issue over, that for me has acknowledged that, you know what, there are important, and I call them exceptions, but there are very real circumstances where a mother's life is in danger. Um, if a baby is already dead and is stillborn, should a mother carry that baby? No, that baby is not alive. Ectopic pregnancy. You know, I'm one of the difficulties I have is that there are some states that have been looking forward to this ruling being overturned, and yet still have not dealt with that issue. I mean, to me, that's kind of basic. You know, and this is among those that do believe that life starts at conception. Once an egg hits a sperm, that's a life, and when it goes into the tube, we don't have the technology to replant that. There's no way that we can be able to change that. And there are states that are still not even acknowledging that or working in that direction. And so part of my concern is kind of outside the emergencies, because I believe emergencies, hey, you know what, mom versus baby, mom, what do you say? You know, to me, that's a given. Mom is going to decide that. I may be dad, I may be sitting on the sidelines. Mom is going to decide that. But part of the difficulty that I have is that around the issue of what may not be convenient. Every one of us wants to delay circumstances or consequences. If I do this, I don't want to have to deal with this particular situation. I was involved in this sexual relationship, and I didn't really think about, I know what can happen from this. I know it's a possibility, but now that we have done that and we wait several months and we say, well, you know what? And I believe the reason why when I say convenient, I'm not saying it's convenient to carry a baby. That's not what I'm talking about. What I mean is it is easier to deal with, let's get rid of the baby, than it is to deal with this one issue that I think kind of gets danced around. What is inside the mother is a life. Now, we may differ as to when it has a soul, heartbeat, brain waves, and so forth, but that is a life. And to me, that's not different from, you know, you may have a child that's physically challenged and you're having difficulty paying for their hospital bills because they've mounted so high. And you're looking at, is it groceries, or is it gas to get to work, or is it taking care of this child? I mean, the only difference is the child may be inside the mother, or the child may be 15, 16. What keeps me from making that decision? Hey, you know what? This 15, 16-year-old child is a real drain on my wallet. And this is really tough. And we're poor and we can't keep doing this. You know, what ethically keeps us from going to that next step? Well, we need to get rid of that child because it's a drain. Now, legally, there's a difference. The law says you can't just get rid of a child because that child's inconvenient. But on the other side, we don't necessarily in our country define what is a life, what is a baby. I think that's important, but I believe all of us understands that life that's inside is a child, is a human being. And I really believe that will help us to understand before. And I think if we teach that ahead of time, that's going to really give us a lot of foundation for why is the decision to get together without protection important? Why is it that we should think about this before the action instead of after the action? If that's a life, I believe that in itself is going to raise the importance. And I believe that it is a life. Honestly, I'm not sure exactly when. I couldn't tell you that. Mm-hmm. That's something that should be studied and should be discussed. But if we do know it's a life, that raises the importance.
Michael, thanks for waiting. Go ahead, please.
Hey, just finally, man, for Chloe, you know, I still respect you and want to be supportive of you. I wish it was 10 of you on this show tonight, and Leon explained that
It's me.
there were many that did not come. But, I want to represent the responsible partner of yours to have this conversation with you and support the fact that you do have the right to make a choice of your body, but our conversations beforehand, maybe they'll affect the tremendous rate of abortions on Black women because we're having conversations. I wish it was 10 Chloes and one Mike, or 10 Chloes and one Ron, to really make this a conversation tonight that people can have and can quantify, because at that point, me being a respectful, responsible partner to you and with you, maybe there's a different trajectory to begin to change the dynamics. Because I got to tell you, selfishly, I'm focused on what's happening in my community, where I see a great disparity in healthcare, in abortion rates, in children in poverty. So my focus is a lot narrower, but I'm going to support Chloe 20 times 20 times 20 times 20. And maybe at some point, Leon will be able to gather, a village of Chloes and have this conversation.
Right on. Thank you. Jeremiah, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to just second what Michael just said. If it's not anybody that supports, I know that all of us up here, support the women and their decisions when it comes to, being there for them, their support system all the way through. To just know that, I think that everybody, especially every man and even a bigger person, needs to get on board with being with them through the whole journey. Through those 9 months, these women need the most support as they can get. Each month, each day, counts for so much. And women can go through so many of their hormone changes, and just the different moods that they have, and not to mention, the body changes. They need to have those male figures, and also the ones that encourage them and be with them all the way to they're about to have birth and even afterwards.
All right. Now, I'm going to throw two questions out in one comment, and I'm going to come to each of you to get your thoughts on this. And we have about 7 minutes left in the show, so please keep it a little short. So here's the question, and here's the setup for it. I asked an elderly relative. She's 97 years old. I asked her thought about this, and she said, here's what's going to happen. People are going to start going to the back rooms like they did before. People are going to die. They're going to go to the back rooms like they did before. And I said, oh, no, that's not going to happen. There's this new thing called abortion tourism, that folks are just going to be able to go to another state and have the abortion. And she said, not going to happen. You need money to do it. And I said, there are some companies that have said they will pay for it. My 97-year-old relative said, listen, 97, and she says, oh, so you have to go to your boss and say, give me the money, I'm going to have an abortion. That ain't right. All right, so there's the whole big thing. I want to hear your comments on all of that. No more than a minute, 15 seconds if you can. Oh, we can keep the show going too. That's fine too. Charlie, let's go to you first.
Keep it going, because I would like to maybe back up on some of the comments that we've heard already. But I think that is a possibility that medical tourism will occur. But, if you can't afford to travel to 2 states away, you're stuck. You're stuck. And this is another thing about poverty determining what happens to a woman against her will. The thing here is, with some laws like Texas, it's a crime for somebody to assist another person to go receive an abortion in another state. And I think that, this goes back to a couple of things. First, there needs to be a national health care system in this nation that allows women to seek these things without having to allow their employer to approve or disapprove. I will say that Dick's Sporting Goods has agreed to allow those employees transportation and cover their transportation and lodging expenses should they seek an abortion. And I think that's very important. But I don't think corporate America should be the people that actually follow this. And I think it creates much like this patchwork of laws amongst the states, a patchwork of benefits. As a gay man, you would have to pick and choose way back when who would have domestic partner benefits and who wouldn't. And that
Well,
might make a determination for you. But again, the other thing, 1 second, pardon me, the birth rate of the US is lower than most of the other industrialized nations in the world. And that is because of poverty and lack of access to overall medical care. There is no reason that we should not have a single payer system. And I think Obamacare was that end goal. And the Republicans kept blocking it and wouldn't fund it. And if you had these states, most of these conservative states, that would not allow that Medicare money to come in by, guess what? Just a vote, you would have less women in poverty and having to make medical decisions that are adverse to her body.
all
Sorry.
right. Thank you, Charlie. Jeremiah, what are your thoughts? I mean, what's going to happen now? We're going to have backroom abortions. We have people traveling. Should corporate America be involved in paying for it? Jeremiah, what do you think?
You're on mute.
Let's go.
My apologies.
There we go. Go ahead.
No, but I was just saying, when it comes to the traveling and everything else, the only problem about that is when you are traveling, and just like what Charlie said, if there is a stoppage to where you can't get over there, you're going to have it where it is, or having it in a back room, it can be more painful, and also a lot of medical things can happen if you do not know what you're doing when it comes to everything. And I feel like even with your state of where you're living, prices can also, be up, or where you're traveling to, or just the cost of, just getting it when you're about to travel to the next place. And, that's just my stance on it.
All right. Thank you. Let's go to Michael, and then Chloe, you're next. Go ahead, Michael.
Hey, so real quick, man, there are always going to be organizations that will fund, an abortion. Particularly with the statistical data as it exists today. So I don't think there'll be an issue. So Charlie mentioned medical tourism. That's been going on for decades. So we're talking abortion tourism. And I don't even want to think in that terminology of this medical procedure. But I don't think that, cost is going to be any factor, because you have a multitude of organizations out here willing to underwrite as long as there's a place to take them, particularly if the goal is to continue to hold a population of a certain demographic at bay. That's the unfortunate aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Chloe?
I definitely, I was actually having this conversation with someone else. People are going to do it. That's the sad part. Like I think it was Charlie that mentioned, it's going to be some hoops to jump through for the people that may not be able to physically go to. I'm actually in Texas, who have to go to Arkansas if you need to take a road trip to take care of certain situations. And that's the sad part, that it's going to end up costing more lives than they're trying to prevent in the long run, because cost more lives than they're trying to save in the long run, because it's going to be the person who, I can do this, or try this, or take this, and or do this, and it's gonna end up being worse than what they're trying to do in the long run. It's truly how I feel. And the fact of having to go to your HR partner to say, hey, I need to take a road trip, that should be an interesting conversation. But I know people in HR who are preparing to do that are good companies that are going to support you to take care of that situation.
All right. Ron, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that is a very real possibility. It's unfortunate. Some issues I see with that is, number one, companies do not need to know where you're going, why you're going, and for what reason. There should not, that I see as violating a variety of different laws, HIPAA laws, several different laws that respect privacy. So I that would not be a good thing. I believe it would not be a good thing for it to be taking place in back alleys and so forth, because as a medical procedure, and again, my stand is that there are several exceptions. And I think performing an abortion for any of those exceptions and not being a person with considerable medical experience, I think is dangerous and is reckless. I believe the only way that this can be done effectively is for, many people may be pro-choice, pro-life, but I think the only way this can be effectively taken care of is if there is specific legislation that that decides, okay, at this point, a baby is a life. And at this point, this is what people are allowed to do. We are, the problem is the courts have been the one that had this decided. And, we know what happens whenever the courts get involved and there's something that's not a law. It can be overthrown, it can be brought back. But I think by having Congress to be able to pass this as a law and that it's something that is nationalized, I believe will help to solve that issue. But yeah, that is a very real, unfortunate possibility.
All right. Someone who contacted me and said they couldn't make the show tonight, but they had a question that they wanted to throw out there, and I think it's a good question for us to end with. What happens next? And specifically, they're talking about Justice Thomas. Apparently, he said that the court needs to re-examine precedents on cases dealing with contraception, same-sex marriage, and even same-sex sex. So what are your thoughts about that? Let's start with Jeremiah first, and then we'll go to Michael and then Charlie. Jeremiah, Michael, and Charlie. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Well, I know that they're going to continue to attack these different laws that's been going around. Even overturn a lot, which President Obama did when he was in office, when it came to the same-sex marriages and just all what you listed. But to be honest, the people there are going to protest more than ever when it comes to these different laws that are about to, they're about to overturn. And, they can say, the press can do, but, it starts really mostly at the ballots when it comes to a lot of these. But these things are going to come in a rapid place. And I know that right now for the people, the only thing they can do right now is just mostly a lot of protests and a lot of speaking up about it.
All right, Michael?
I don't know, man. I mean, gays are a powerful, powerful group and lobbying organization. Abortion, pro-life people are a powerful organization. So what you have in this country at this time is a atomic mix. And, what is that implosion, explosion? I'm not sure. I know that sooner or later, something is going to happen.
Let's go to Charlie.
I would say that the LGBT lobby is not as strong as we look. And depending on where you're at in this country, our access to equal rights is varied. I would have much more difficulty getting married and being accepted in a community in the South than I would in Delaware. And I fully acknowledge that. Now, what I also think is you have to keep in perspective that Lawrence v. Texas wasn't decided until the summer of 2003, which struck down anti-sodomy laws. And I don't think we would have achieved marriage equality without the court system. And the court system is the last place of refuge for the oppressed. And I'm thankful that the United States Supreme Court gave me a constitutional liberty that I should have had all along. Now, as far as what we're talking about with the Supreme Court, there's a long-held standard called stare decisis. And loosely translated, that means let the decision stand. By going against that long-established precedent, we have opened a Pandora's box of due process cases that could come back to the court. Corporate law cases that could use this as a runaround to get away with doing things ethically. This whole idea that due process can occur or it can be decided at whim is dangerous. It can reverse 40 years of civil rights legislation. It can reverse 40 years of civil rights casework, and that is dangerous. And it's inappropriate for a justice to mention a legal issue or a different issue other than that is what the court was deciding. This
Yeah.
case was about abortion access. It was not about gay marriage. It was not about religious exemptions. It was about abortion. And I think that by the justice not being more myopic in his opinion has created a problem. Now, I will also say this. For people that are strict constitutionalists, as are most of them the conservative members of the court, that is a departure from that because they are traditionally myopic in their case decisions, and they like to isolate it to a single issue. So I'm confused as to why he would do that. I think it flies in the face of judicial procedure as well. It's not a good thing to do, and and frankly, I'm going to fight for my rights. My civil rights matter, and I don't think anybody gets to vote on my marriage or my personal relationships or denies me equal access to those things that heterosexual couples take for granted. Before marriage equality, there were over 2,000 rights afforded to people just by simply having a marriage license and a wedding performed. It will cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars to create individually all those contracts that I might not be able to get through simply going to a courthouse and getting a marriage license and marrying the person I love. And that's a problem. And it's a rule of unintended consequences.
All right, Charlie, we got to
Sorry.
cut you off there.
I know.
All
I got a
right,
lot to say about
Ron,
that. That's
Ron, and then Chloe. Ron, and then Chloe. Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, probably one thing I might take issue with something Charlie said about the courts being the refuge for those that are oppressed. It has become that, but I'm finding that having courts decide what is law and what is not law has almost become as tenuous as a presidential executive order. The DREAM Act, which was an Obama executive order. That actually is something that I kind of supported, but it's only as good as the president has signed it until the next president, who can very easily revoke it. And having something that relies on a court decision is only as good as the court that's there. Suppose the entire composition of the court, changes, or then a ruling can change as well. So, and I think that Clarence Thomas kind of tipped his hand and helped us to see that. Unfortunately, I should say fortunately, that we can see what's coming down the road. But that's why in the very beginning I said that this was probably not a good thing to have this kicked out to the states because of unforeseen consequences. There was a senator that was discussing the Loving versus Virginia ruling, whether interracial couples were going to be able to be married. And a congressman said, hey, maybe that's something that should have stayed with the states. They went to SCOTUS, and SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, did say, hey, you know what? This ruling stands. We can have people marry interracially. But again, what happens is the court makes the ruling, but then Congress doesn't follow up to make that a law. And I think that's part of the problem. So now we are left with 50 states making 50 different decisions, not really solving the issue. And I think what Clarence Thomas said was correct. I think it's dangerous. I think that we have yet to see the consequences of what's going to happen when something like civil rights gets kicked to the various different states to make a decision on that. That's going to be tough. And this is going to be hard. It's going to be hard to not say never after the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
Mm-hmm. Chloe, go ahead.
I agree with Ron in the sense of the never say never, unfortunately. And it's always been interesting to me that the federal government in every state has all these different laws, just kind of focusing on the abortion part of it. But all these different laws and things that are in place for women's reproductive organs, but there are no laws regulating male reproductive organs. So it's like they kicked everything out to the state, and like you said, we have 50 different rules, and depending on where you live, God only knows what kind of rules you have to abide by. And unfortunately, all these rulings that are not put into law are really honestly setting us up for failure, because I never thought I'd see the day where something like this would happen. And the fact that there are all these other rulings that are potentially on the table that truly um, could set us back years. It's very unnerving. It makes me very uncomfortable about the state of the country, and it's just one of those. You would really think, we're supposed to be making progress each year and going forward each year, and yet all these things are seeming to go backwards. And I'm sure there's a deeper rooted issue as to why. And I'm hoping that something is done to where we can get to a better solution, and not continue to regress instead and make progress in this country.
I would
All
like
right.
to go back to a couple things. Sorry,
Sure.
Leon.
Hold on 1 second. Hold on a second. We have exactly 3 minutes remaining in the show. I'm going to call on each of you, and I want you to give your closing comments. You have 30 seconds for your closing comments. And if you have something that you'd like to promote, a book, a website, even if you just want to say, if you want to continue the conversation with me, here's how you can get in touch with me. Everyone has 30 seconds. You'll know that your time's up when I come back on the screen. Charlie, let's go to you first.
Again, thank you for having me tonight. This has been a fun and unexpected conversation. I think that discourse has to happen for change to be solidified and to occur. I think what has happened is a major problem in terms of civil rights and in terms of women being able to choose their reproductive freedom. I further think that the rules of unintended consequences are going to come because of this decision. I think that this is a slippery slope that should not have been opened, and 50 years of judicial precedent should have remained intact. I also think we cannot wait for legislators to determine the path to equality for people. If we were waiting on the U.S. Congress in the 50s to desegregate schools, that wouldn't have happened in 1954. The court acted as the place of last refuge
Thank
for
you.
minorities
Thank
to
you, Charlie.
erase the system.
Time limit. Thank you. Thank you. Let's go to Michael. Go ahead, Michael.
Hey, I'll give Charlie my 30 seconds if he wants, man. So really like the conversation. But first of all,
Does he pay for that through Cash App, or what? How does that happen?
Hey
hey,
man,
that's a good idea, man.
I'm down here in the gutter with everybody else.
Go
I
ahead.
hear you. I hear you. Well, thank God I'm not. But it's been a great conversation, and as I mentioned, us as guys have to be supportive and understanding. It's better to understand than always to be understood. And I really appreciate the conversation. If you want to hear more about things that are happening in Black America, urban Black America, 60 Minutes in Black America, I'm the host every Sunday, 6 p.m. to 7 Eastern Time. Go to the Facebook page of 60 Minutes in Black America or Michael Haney to get the information regarding our show every Sunday. Thanks a lot for having me on, Leon.
All right. Thank you for being here. We'll go to Chloe and then Ron. Go ahead, Chloe.
Again, thank you for letting me be the woman. Or I didn't plan to be the only woman, but I am. But I just, again, want to say I truly think that things really need to be equal amongst the men and the women. If you're going to make one do one thing, govern both of them. But again, that's neither here nor there. My name is Chloe. I am at Cousin Chloe on Instagram. I have a show called Rouge, Rants, and Rhythm on my YouTube channel where I talk about current events, and I sit there and I do my makeup while I do it. But I talk about different current events, and you can find that on my YouTube channel. And it's YouTube.com/Cousin Chloe.
Let's go to Ron and then Jeremiah.
I enjoyed this conversation. This was really good. It was very level-headed. It was civil, and I learned a lot as a result. Um, 2 web pages, if I may. I am a copy editor for children's books, and you can find my information there at harrisonmedia.org. That's harrisonmedia.org. And I have a site that I have been up and down and on and off on that I'm going to be reviving again soon. It's religionorpolitics.com. That's religionorpolitics.com, where I discuss a variety of issues where politics and religion both meet and sometimes diverge. So I think those would be 2 good sites that you can visit.
All right. Thank you, Ron. And Jeremiah, go ahead.
Well, I want to just say thank you for having me on today. I learned so much when it came to this whole conversation, especially from all of you guys. You guys did awesome. And if you guys want to follow me on Jeremiah Nixon on LinkedIn, and also check me out Jasmine's First Impression Sports Talk on Mondays at 9 p.m. And also follow me on my Instagram at sportsnixon_elite.
All right. Thank you, Jeremiah. Thank you, Ron, Charlie, Michael, Jeremiah, and Chloe. Great conversation, a civil conversation. There was some disagreement, but notice we didn't start calling each other names and all those things. And that's what we try to do here at Real Thoughts and Conversations, is have a conversation and be able to learn some things from each other, have great conversation. That's what we try to do here. My name is Leon Thomas. Thanks again to our guests for being here today. We had a great show, great conversation. Look forward to seeing you next time on Real Thoughts and Conversations. Here we go.